Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play ActRaiser. In the last part, we went through Northwall and now it's time for us to head into the final area of the game, Deathheim. We're gonna put on the magical light just because I prefer it for this final section, and in case you forgot that we reached max population, that's what it's looking like. Let's head on down. This will be the last battle. All monsters will be completely eliminated from this world. Sir Moyle, are you ready? May luck be with you. Deathheim isn't your average final area. It goes more of a Mega Man route with it being a boss rush, but not a complete boss rush. You're only fighting all of the Act 2 bosses like the Minotaur, the weird flame wheel in Itos, whatever that thing was in Northwall, the Pharaoh, so on and so forth. But they're not the exact same boss. Their patterns are unchanged, but they're a lot faster and therefore can be a bit more annoying in some cases. Thankfully, this is a boss rush that checkpoints you after every fight, so you never have to outright start it over unless you get a game over. And I didn't bring in Magical Stardust just because I'd be spamming it on all the fights to begin with anyway, and I prefer to have Magical Light for the actual final boss. On the whole, it's not a hard boss rush. The hardest part's probably the second boss from not from Northwall, Moranha, the weird snake thing. Although the dragon actually has its annoyances too. But something I'm surprised I haven't gone over yet. I know I've mentioned that I love this game's soundtrack several times, but the person who composed the soundtrack was Yuzo Koshiro, who I know mostly from stuff like the Yeast series, like the old ones. But he's also notable for, I think, the first 3 Streets of Rage games, Robotrek, the Shenmue duology so far. I'm not sure if he's working on Shenmue 3. He might be. I think he worked on Portrait of Ruin. I think he does work on the Etrian Odyssey games, but those just aren't my kind of games. As well as, I think, some of the Project Crossbone stuff. He's all over the place. But his music is fantastic. I don't want to say ActRaiser is my favorite of his soundtracks. That probably comes down to, Streets of Rage 2's music was really, really good. But so was, actually, it's probably either this, Streets of Rage 2, or, I think he worked on Kid Icarus Uprising, so maybe some of that stuff. Also, what you're about to see is the pattern you can do with this boss fight if you didn't use the Magical Stardust like I did. I failed at it a bit at first, but that's the projectile attack. Attack it 3 times, jump up here, go down there, repeat. Honestly, without Magical Stardust, it's probably one of the easiest fights in the game. Mind you, I think every boss has a notable pattern that you can get them set into where you can just consistently not get hit, but hit them a lot of times. Which, you know, in a way that's good, no, actually, I think that's actually really good boss design. If you notice their pattern and can recognize how to abuse it, that means you're winning the fight and recognizing it. That's boss design, Kyle. Though I know there's also a camp that really likes the bosses that don't mind screwing you up. Like the ones that have random patterns, like most Shin Megami Tensei series bosses. They have a pool of attacks and they'll throw them out at random. This is probably the hardest fight out of the refights, because without Magical Stardust or Magical Aura, reaching him is hard, to say the least. Unless you bait him down, and even then you're likely going to take a hit just because of how he moves around. I would have sped this up because boss rush, but it's such a short boss fight compared to some of the other games I do, like Mega Man and such, and since they're faster anyway, why not speed it up in my eyes? Plus, without it being sped up, I think this part would be like 16 minutes long, which for an LP that averages probably 25 minutes an episode. I might as well keep it as long as I can. Honestly, I do wonder why they never did a boss rush with the first 6 bosses. I mean, I can understand to some extent because they're pretty environment reliant, especially in the case of the Moranha first boss fight. But the Centaur, I think it's actually a Manticore, not a Chimera from Bloodpool Act 1. Where are they at, huh? And even then, given the fact they're teleporting you into the actual environment you fought them in and not like Mega Man series Wily rooms, why not the first half? I mean, I guess, technically speaking, you could look at the Act 1 bosses as mini-bosses, where these are the actual leaders behind whatever darkness is going on within that particular area. But, yeah. Also, I actually really like that boss rush room for some reason. I don't know why. It's very simple. It's just Tanzra's head in the background, surrounded by the heads of the 6 second bosses, but, eh. And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, when you die, you can start right at the boss you died at. And if you have max health and level like I do, you don't really need to worry too much, because you can war of attrition most of the bosses in this game. You'll take a lot of hits along the way, but you don't need to worry about dying to them at this health. Unless you're on professional mode, in which case, then very much worry, because you're getting more damage done to you to begin with, and you don't have magic to help you deal with things. Though actually, I forget if I mentioned it when I was talking about professional mode, but one particular change I know professional mode does is in the first act of Aitos, where we got that weird range extender thing that also doubled our damage for the weird dragon boss there. That's not there in professional mode. I forget what it is. I think it might just be an apple, honestly, but it makes that fight in particular really annoying because you cannot hit it as easily. But with that, it's time for us to have to the big bad Tanzra himself. Or Satan, or whatever. Tanzra's first phase, he likes to summon his own little magical Stardust attack, which I, for some reason, have a really hard time dodging. Then he'll come down to the ground and fire some projectiles like that. If you dug around that distance from him and just attack as fast as you can take Tanzra down really quickly, because you have the range extender automatically here. And as you can see, it kind of tears him to pieces. Phase 2 is a bit more lethal, though. Not by much. It has a huge health bar, as you can see, but its only attacks are to do that exact same attack, only wider. Then he opens up his weak point need to attack before he shoots out a little projectile from it eventually. Then he'll go to the very bottom of the screen and the very top to shoot out those projectiles. That's actually what you want to use Magical Light on, just so you can take them all out at once. As long as you use the invincibility frames and Magical Light to get rid of those projectiles and not take stupid hits like I do, and just spam the attack button whenever you're able, Tanzra is a very easy final boss. Easier than some of the second act bosses, honestly. He has length on his side just because of how much health he has, but comparatively, he's probably one of the easiest final bosses I've faced in a while in a platformer for this channel. That says something compared to some of the recent ones I've done. But with that, that's game. God, that was beautiful sounding. Also kind of reminds me of the ending of Majora's Mask, actually, for some reason. Sir Moyle, you have been a tireless master. With this, our current duties are complete. We have labored long and hard to help our people become free. Also, I cannot speed up this text at all. I do feel a bit of regret that they will on longer need our help. I think you mean no longer their game. Let's take one last look at each of the thriving towns we've helped develop. And we get a bit of an interesting thing for Enix, kind of similar to the Dragon Quest go around the world at the end of the game sections. This is Fillmore. Look how the people cleared and cultivated the land and constructed a prospering town, after I lightninged most of them. Oh yes, one of the men of Fillmore had the ability to predict the future. His ability helped save Fillmore. He finally gave his life for his town. I'm sure he expected that final fate. From birth, all people are guided by a force called destiny. Because people are unaware of their destiny, they may not understand all that life has to offer. The man who quietly accepted his destiny is also the one who becomes a great leader and person. I'm reminded of a sequence from Final Fantasy Tactics, actually, I think it was, where the text scroll was really slow. Or was that Grandia? I forget. This is Bloodpool. The lake has already returned to its beautiful blue color. Oh yes, there was an energetic boy named Teddy. Sir Moyle and I are supposed to treat all people equally. But since he was such a likable young boy, he received much of our attention. Also, I like how Moyle had more spaces after it because they planned for all the characters. Oh, do you remember the people of Bloodpool had to draw lots to decide who was to be sacrificed? That should be a question, shouldn't it? At the time, I didn't tell you, but I knew whose lot was drawn. It was Teddy. Didn't 3 people have to be sacrificed, though? What about the other 2? Were they just nameless people? I mean, I guess most of the people in this game are nameless, aren't they? I'm not sure if the game always follows this order for the areas, by the way. It also might just go in the areas you cleared, but I think it probably goes in the set order. This is the desert town, Cassandora. Now, there is very little evidence of the once massive desert. My brain's auto-completing. People said they were drawn into the pyramid by its magical powers. But should we believe this? The monsters living in the pyramid were nothing more than reincarnates of the human slaves who built the pyramid. Their spirits remained drawing people's minds to the pyramid. Now the pyramid is sealed and their souls saved. They will be reborn as human beings. Actually, I mean, they kind of did, because your score gets converted into the soul counter for the temple after you finish a major stage. Also, do I sense a bit of biblical stuff there? I'll imagine more than usual, at least. This is the volcanic town Aitos. I was so impressed by these people who tried to build homes in spite of the continuous lava flow. I mean, I kind of did leave them to rot in the fire for a bit there, didn't I? Their leader passed from this life right before your very eyes. I am certain he dedicated his whole life to informing people of your existence. I hoped Aitos would become a beautiful town, representative of his great spirit. Could we scroll up the text speed a little bit, game? Also, I'd like to know, they have a lot more typos in this ending than most of the rest of the game, which is kind of odd. Miranha, you scene script hell. This is the jungle town, Marana. My, they have built so many homes on such a small island. I felt very sad when the town's 2 leaders were tempted by the wicked mirror. But human beings have a tendency to choose the easier way when faced with different difficulties. Having seen the James T. Kirk voice, people's weaknesses, I felt obligated to lead them in the right direction. I'm pretty certain I finished most Dragon Quest world circles by now, because, mind you, whenever I play a Dragon Quest game, I don't really tend to go around the world when I beat the final boss. I generally just tend to go right for the ending. This is the last of our lands, Northwall. I felt a little guilty about letting people live in such a cold climate. but they successfully overcame many problems. Their two leaders were telling us that when they found the two initials on the mighty tree, they felt a certain affection towards what or who had left the initials. Turn page at the beep. I think those two leaders were sweethearts who had lived here long ago, but were killed by monsters. Their spirits have since come to dwell in these bodies. If my story is correct, the sweethearts have finally reunited after a long separation, even though they don't remember. Isn't it a beautiful story? This being so, it seems your people, as well as yourself, have had hard times. Sir Moyle, why don't we take a look inside the shrine? Okay. No one's here. There's no one here. I just said that, Cherub. In former times, people would call for you and ask for your help. As cultures and lands become more advanced, do people tend to forget those who helped them? But then, people may be most happy when not in need of help from their master, or when they have forgotten him. Should we yearn for a time when people will no longer need to ask for our help? I mean, theoretically, yes, because that means they have reached peace. And sued by 20th Century Fox, though I think that actual musical thing is actually, I forget what it's called, but it has a name of its own. My dad and I were actually talking about that last night, coincidentally. But that's ActRaiser. I love this game. I'm not usually a fan of sim games, which I think I brought up before in this LP, but there's something about ActRaiser with the mix of platforming and the relatively incomplex sim section. It just makes me absolutely love it. And because of that, I actually have to take points away from its sequel for getting rid of the sim sections, because ActRaiser 2 is pure platforming. It's more advanced and refined platforming, but getting rid of the sim sections kind of harmed it in my eyes. If they had maybe evolved on what they started with it as well in this game, I think ActRaiser 2 probably would have been one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. Musically, this game's fantastic, but I'm just glad I finally got this game out of the way, because I have been talking about doing this game, as I mentioned back in part 1, since I LP'd the original Dragon Warrior, which at the time of recording was about 5 years ago, probably closer to 6 at this point, honestly. And who knows how much closer it is to like 6.5 or something whenever this gets uploaded. But it's a long time coming, but I'm glad I did it because I had a lot of fun revisiting this game. Like I mentioned, this is one of the first games I think I've done that I was introduced to through YouTube. Thank you, Clan of the Grey Wolf. But I'm so glad I played it because it's just such a fun Super Nintendo game. And for such an early game in the system, it really shows what they could really try to pull with this system. And I'm really glad about that. Because the Super Nintendo, don't get me wrong, it had its share of shit games, especially when they were based off movies. Just look at most of the AVGN playlists to see that. But in general, I think the Super Nintendo had a much better track record with good games compared to the NES, be it original or otherwise. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. One thing I should mention, though, before I go full out with my intro, I actually just remembered. Since we've beaten the game, you can now access Professional Mode, which, as I mentioned, is just all of the action stages in a row with max health with no spells. If you want to access that, after you've beaten the game like this is one of those ending screens that you have to press the reset button to get off of. Press down twice. Basically, you start on, I think, continue, then go down to new game. Then you'll go down to a hidden option, which is Professional Mode. I'd say worth a shot, but I'm not a fan of it myself because I like the sim mode stuff. Either way, with that, thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. Though I actually have a bit more of an idea for this one, as since a certain sequel was revealed not too long ago my time, a bit farther for you guys, I think it's about time I do the game that comes before it so I can tackle the new game as soon as possible. Wink. Either way, see you guys then.